Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
The winding paths of history are often marked by stories of resilience, survival, and profound tragedy. Among these narratives, the Trail of Tears stands out as one of the most harrowing episodes in American history. It is a tale etched into the collective memory of the United States, symbolizing the devastating consequences of colonial expansion and manifest destiny. Yet, woven into this sorrowful tapestry is an often overlooked group whose presence and experiences add complexity to an already painful chapter: black-skinned natives. Their role in the Trail of Tears is a story seldom told, buried beneath layers of historical generalization and oversimplification. Unveiling this narrative not only deepens our understanding of the period, but also honors the memory of those whose voices have long been silenced. To grasp the significance of black-skinned natives in the Trail of Tears, one must first understand the intricate societal fabric of the southeastern tribes before their forced removal. Tribes such as the Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw were not isolated entities. They engaged in extensive cultural and economic exchanges with European settlers and Africans, both enslaved and free. Over time, the convergence of these communities led to the emergence of multi-ethnic identities, where African heritage became interwoven with Native American traditions. This blending was not merely social but deeply rooted in familial bonds, political alliances, and shared struggles against colonial encroachment. The Cherokee Nation, for instance, is emblematic of this cultural fusion. By the early 19th century, the Cherokee had adopted certain European practices, including the ownership of enslaved Africans. However, the dynamics of slavery within Native societies differed significantly from the brutal plantation systems of the American South. Many African individuals lived in relative autonomy, marrying into Native families and contributing to tribal economies. This complex relationship created a class of Black Cherokee who were both integrated into and marginalized within their society, a duality that would later shape their fate during the Trail of Tears. The Seminole Nation presents another compelling facet of this history. Unlike the Cherokee and other tribes, the Seminole actively resisted the institution of slavery, providing sanctuary to runaway slaves from the southern plantations. These escaped slaves and their descendants became known as Black Seminoles. Bound by mutual resistance to oppression, the Seminole and Black Seminoles forged alliances that defied the racial hierarchies imposed by colonial powers. This partnership would prove significant during the Seminole Wars, where both groups fought valiantly against U.S. military forces determined to remove them from their lands. As the United States expanded westward, the Indian Removal Act of 1830, championed by President Andrew Jackson, formalized the government's policy of displacing Native American tribes from their ancestral homelands to designated territories west of the Mississippi River. This legislative act set the stage for the Trail of Tears, a series of forced relocations marked by immense suffering, disease, and death. For black-skinned natives, this displacement was fraught with unique challenges. Their identities were often ambiguous in the eyes of federal authorities, who oscillated between categorizing them as enslaved property or as tribal members. This ambiguity subjected them to varying degrees of mistreatment and exploitation. For enslaved African-descended individuals within Native nations, the Trail of Tears compounded their bondage with the horrors of forced migration. Slaveholders among the Cherokee, Choctaw, and Chickasaw took their human property with them on the treacherous journey, forcing them to endure the same brutal conditions of exposure, starvation, and disease. Yet, unlike their native owners, these enslaved people had no stake in the outcome of the relocation. They were victims of a fate entirely beyond their control. The trauma they endured remains a stark testament to the pervasive reach of slavery into every facet of American expansion. Conversely, free Black natives faced a different set of hardships. Despite their integration into tribal communities, They often encountered suspicion and hostility from both U.S. authorities and fellow Native members. Their mixed heritage made them targets of racial prejudice, and they were sometimes forcibly enslaved or conscripted into labor during migrations. The federal government's lack of a coherent policy towards these individuals left them vulnerable to exploitation, caught between rigid racial categories that failed to acknowledge their complex identities. In the case of the Black Seminoles, their resistance did not wane even in the face of removal. Many chose to flee deeper into Florida's swamps rather than submit to relocation. Those who were captured or surrendered were subjected to forced migration alongside the Seminole, yet their struggle for autonomy continued even in the Indian Territory. Their plight did not end with the journey. In many instances, they were pursued by slave catchers and subjected to further displacement, highlighting the relentless oppression they faced. The aftermath of the Trail of Tears for black-skinned natives was as harrowing as the journey itself. In the unfamiliar and often hostile territories west of the Mississippi, they had to rebuild their lives amidst persistent racial discrimination and economic hardship. Enslaved individuals remained in bondage, while free black natives struggled to assert their rights within reconstituted tribal governments that were themselves grappling with the trauma of displacement. Over time, the social and political structures of these tribes evolved, yet the legacies of exclusion and marginalization persisted, leaving lasting scars on the communities. Despite these adversities, black-skinned natives contributed significantly to the rebuilding of tribal societies in the Indian Territory. Their labor, knowledge, and resilience were indispensable in the reconstruction of communities devastated by removal. Yet, their contributions have been largely neglected in mainstream historical narratives. It is only through dedicated scholarship and oral histories that their stories have begun to emerge, challenging monolithic portrayals of Native American experiences during this period. Recognizing the role of black-skinned natives in the Trail of Tears compels us to reevaluate our understanding of identity, belonging, and resistance in American history. Their experiences underscore the fluidity of racial and cultural boundaries, illustrating how marginalized groups navigated and sometimes subverted oppressive systems. Moreover, their stories invite a broader reflection on the ways in which history is recorded and remembered, whose voices are amplified and whose are silenced. In honoring the memory of black-skinned natives who endured the Trail of Tears, we affirm the importance of inclusive historical narratives that acknowledge the full spectrum of human experience. Their resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering serves as a testament to the enduring strength of marginalized communities. By bringing their stories to light, we not only enrich our understanding of the past, but also pave the way for a more just and compassionate future. The Trail of Tears is not merely a chapter in history. It is a mirror reflecting the complexities of identity, oppression, and survival. Within this reflection, the faces of black-skinned natives emerge, resilient, complex, and profoundly human. Their story is an essential thread in the fabric of American history, one that demands recognition, remembrance, and reverence.